Welcome back to a new video. Today I will tell you one creepypasta. I hope you like it. The House at Ashford Grove. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business and secrets were hard to keep. But there was one place that everyone avoided, a place no one talked about unless they had to. The house at Ashford Grove. The house had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. It was a hulking, decrepit mansion that sat at the end of a long, winding road, hidden behind a thick wall of trees and overgrown shrubs. The windows were shattered, the roof sagging, and the once grand front porch was now little more than a collection of rotting boards. When I was a kid, the older kids would dare each other to go up to the house, to knock on the door or peek inside the windows. But no one ever did it. Not really. There was something about the place that just felt wrong, like a cold shiver that ran down your spine whenever you got too close. It was as if the house itself didn't want to be disturbed. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the house, how it had once belonged to a wealthy family who had mysteriously vanished one night. They were never found, and the house had been left to rot, untouched for decades. She told me that strange things happened there, that people who went inside never came out the same. I didn't believe her, of course. They were just ghost stories, the kind that old people tell to scare kids into behaving. But as I got older, the stories stuck with me, lodged in the back of my mind like a splinter. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the house, something real. When I turned 18, I decided I had to find out for myself. It was late October, the air crisp with the first bite of winter, when I finally gathered the courage to go. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not my friends, not my parents. I just grabbed a flashlight, threw on my jacket, and headed out to Ashford Grove. The road was deserted, the houses growing fewer and farther between as I walked. The trees loomed overhead, their branches bare and twisted like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. As I approached the house, I could feel my heart start to race. A nervous excitement mingled with a deep, primal fear. The gate was rusted and hanging off its hinges, the once manicured lawn now a tangled mess of weeds and thorns. I hesitated for a moment at the entrance, staring up at the dark silhouette of the mansion against the night sky. For a brief second, I considered turning back, but the thought of spending the rest of my life wondering what was inside pushed me forward. I made my way up the cracked stone path, my footsteps crunching against the gravel. The porch groaned under my weight as I stepped onto it, the wood splintering beneath my boots. I reached out and touched the door, the wood cold and rough under my fingers. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty house. I shone my flashlight inside, the beam cutting through the thick darkness that clung to every corner. The air was stale, heavy with dust and decay. I could see the remains of old furniture scattered throughout the foyer, an overturned chair, a shattered mirror, a once elegant chandelier that now lay in pieces on the floor. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The house felt different than I expected, colder, emptier. It was as if the very air had been sucked out of the place, leaving behind a void that pressed in on me from all sides. I wandered through the first floor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The rooms were all in a state of disrepair, the walls peeling, the floors warped from years of neglect. I found the kitchen, the dining room, a sitting room filled with tattered armchairs and a moth-eaten rug. But there was no sign of anything unusual, nothing that explained the stories my grandmother had told me. But then, I found the staircase. It was in the back of the house, hidden behind a heavy wooden door that had been left ajar. The stairs were narrow and steep, the steps covered in a thick layer of dust. As I shone my flashlight up the staircase, I noticed something strange. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one cracked and stained with age. A sense of unease washed over me as I started to climb the stairs. The mirrors reflected the beam of my flashlight in odd, disorienting ways, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. I tried not to look at them, focusing instead on the steps in front of me. But out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing things, flickers of movement, shapes that didn't belong. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was breathing hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I found myself in a long hallway lined with doors, each one identical to the last. The air was colder up here, the silence more oppressive. I felt as if I were being watched, as if the house itself were aware of my presence. I opened the first door on my left and stepped inside. It was a bedroom, or at least it had been once. The bed was still there, the mattress sagging in the middle, the sheets torn and yellowed with age. A dresser stood against the far wall, its drawers hanging open, their contents strewn across the floor. There was a large window, the glass cracked and dirty, through which I could see the tops of the trees swaying in the wind. But it wasn't the bed or the dresser that caught my attention. It was the writing on the walls. Every inch of the room was covered in words, scrawled in a dark reddish-brown substance that I didn't want to think too hard about. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, the letters overlapping each other in a chaotic mess. I couldn't make out what it said, but there was something frantic, almost desperate about the way the words had been written. As I turned to leave, my flashlight flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I cursed under my breath, shaking the flashlight, trying to get it to work, but it was dead. Then I heard it, a faint whisper so soft that I almost missed it. It came from the hallway just outside the door. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was calling me. I clenched the key in my hand, the metal digging into my palm as I stepped back into the hallway. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me to follow. I could feel the pull of it, a strange compulsion that I couldn't resist. I followed the sound down the hallway, past the rows of closed doors. The whispering grew louder, the words becoming clearer, though I still couldn't understand them. They were jumbled, overlapping, as if multiple voices were speaking at once, but they all seemed to be saying the same thing, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Help us! Help us!" I felt a surge of fear, a primal instinct telling me to turn back, to leave this place and never return. But the compulsion was stronger. I had to know what was down there. I had to see. I descended the staircase, my hand gripping the banister for support. The steps were steep and uneven, each one creaking ominously under my weight. The darkness grew thicker the deeper I went, until I could barely see my hand in front of my face. When I reached the bottom, the whispering stopped. I found myself in a small stone-walled chamber, the air damp and cold. The walls were covered in moss and mildew, and the floor was uneven, littered with debris. In the center of the room was a large iron door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that I couldn't make out in the dim light. The key in my hand seemed to pulse with warmth as I approached the door. I could feel something behind it, something old and powerful, something that had been waiting for a long time. My hand shook as I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open with a low groan, revealing a dark, narrow passage beyond. The air that rushed out was colder than ice, sending a shiver down my spine. But it wasn't just the cold that made me hesitate, it was the smell. It was the stench of death, of rot and decay so overpowering that it made my stomach turn. I gagged, covering my mouth with my hand as I stepped into the passage, the darkness swallowing me whole. The walls closed in around me, the space so tight that I had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The floor was slick with some kind of slime, and the air was thick with the sound of dripping water. The smell grew stronger the deeper I went, until it was all I could do to keep from vomiting. Then, suddenly, the passage opened up into a large, cavernous room. My flashlight flickered back to life, casting a weak beam of light across the space. The room was enormous, the ceiling lost in shadows high above. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with dozens of glass jars. The jars were covered in dust and grime, but I could see the faint outlines of what was inside, shriveled, twisted shapes floating in murky liquid. My stomach churned as I realized what I was looking at: preserved body parts, some human, some not. Arms, legs, hands, and heads all floating in those jars, their features distorted and unrecognizable. But the jars weren't the only thing in the room. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by the weak beam of my flashlight, was a large stone slab, and on that slab lay a figure covered in a tattered sheet. My heart raced as I approached the slab, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The figure was still, deathly still, but I could feel a presence emanating from it, a cold, malevolent energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the edge of the sheet. I hesitated, a voice in the back of my mind screaming at me to stop, to turn back while I still could. But I ignored it. I had come this far. I had to know. With trembling hands, I pulled the sheet back. The figure beneath was human, at least it had been once. The skin was pale and shriveled, pulled tight over bones that jutted out at odd angles. The eyes were sunken deep into their sockets, and the mouth was frozen in a rictus grin, revealing rows of blackened teeth. But it wasn't just the state of the body that horrified me. It was the fact that I recognized it. It was me. I staggered back, my mind reeling, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. But there was no mistaking it. The corpse on the slab was identical to me in every way. Same height, same build, same features. Even the clothes it wore were the same as the ones I had on. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment the beam of light caught something else. Another figure standing at the edge of the room watching me. I whipped the flashlight around, but there was nothing there, just shadows, shifting and twisting in the darkness. But I knew I had seen something. Someone. The whispering started again, louder now, more insistent, filling the room with its maddening chorus. "Help us! Help us!" I turned and ran, the beam of the flashlight bouncing wildly as I bolted back down the narrow passage. The walls seemed to close in around me, the darkness growing thicker, more oppressive. The whispering followed me, growing louder, closer, until it was all I could hear. I burst out of the passage and into the stone-walled chamber, slamming the iron door shut behind me. The whispering stopped abruptly, the silence so sudden that it was deafening. I didn't stop to catch my breath. I raced up the stairs, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The house was different now, warmer, brighter, as if the darkness that had clung to it was lifting. But I didn't care. I just wanted to get out, to escape whatever nightmare I had unleashed. I ran out the front door and into the night, not stopping until I was far away from Ashford Grove, until the house was just a distant memory. I never told anyone what happened that night. Who would believe me? Who could believe that I had seen my own corpse, that I had heard the voices of the dead? But I can't forget. The memory haunts me, follows me wherever I go. I can still hear the whispering sometimes, in the dead of night when everything is quiet. It's fainter now, more distant, but it's still there. And sometimes when I'm alone, I see shadows where there shouldn't be any, watching, waiting. I know that one day they'll come for me. One day I'll have to go back to the house at Ashford Grove, and when I do, I won't come out the same. Thank you so much for listening. Please consider subscribing. It is completely free.